Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program at the crossroads of religion and life, a series highlighting the cultural and social interaction between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTVC. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
Hello, I'm Barbara Holmes, a staff member of St. John's United Methodist Church and your host for today's Austin Faith Dialogue. This weekly religious public affairs program is sponsored by Austin Metropolitan Ministries. With the formation of Austin Metropolitan Ministries just about a year ago, members from the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim communities are now working together in this new interfaith organization. In order to learn more about each other's religion, traditions, and practices, Austin Metropolitan Ministries has initiated a Trialogue. And our guests today are participants in this Trialogue and will tell us more about it and what it means for the religious and the larger community. I'd like to introduce to you Sabak Karam, the president of the Islamic Center of Austin, Donald Bob, pastor, Hyde Park Presbyterian Church, Scott Salson, the rabbi at Congregation Beth Israel. Thank you very much for being here. I'm looking forward to our discussion. Trialogue, tri meaning three, and three faiths involved, and you talk about your faith, the things that you have in common, and some of the differences, and we want to know how that happens. And Don, I understand you're kind of the catalyst and are the convener of this group. How did this opportunity for listening and learning come about?
I think what gave us the impetus was the creation of the Austin Metropolitan Ministries about a year or so ago, when we realized that the Jewish and Muslim communities would be joining and that the Christian community really didn't know all that much about them and that we didn't know a lot about each other. And so it just seemed like it was time to get the leaders of the three communities together, which is what we did. The second impetus was also the fact that we just need to understand each other in this pluralistic society in which we live, and that it's time that we get to know each other and break down some of the barriers that have been there for centuries.
Well, of course, the Trialogue is a wonderful opportunity to do that, not only representatively, but personally, getting to know these other people better. Sabak, how did you get involved in the dialogue?
I guess it was initially from a contact by Don Bob. He has lectured to my informal classes that I teach at University of Texas on Islam. And I try to show the links between the Judeo-Christian tradition and the Islamic tradition.
Some of the very basic things that we all share in common. And Scott, how did you get involved?
Well, this gentleman to my right is more than a catalyst, he's a spark. And I don't know how he got hold of me, but he did, and invited me. And I was touched by the graciousness of the invitation, so nothing to lose, everything to gain.
Well, that would have been my next question. Why did you respond favorably? I'm sure you don't need one more meeting to go to.
No, and that's why I've missed a few, to be honest. I responded because I was fascinated by the idea. It's something that I had not been involved in the sense of a trialogue. A dialogue I've been involved in many times, but the trialogue was a new dimension, not just because the numbers indicate it's a new dimension, but it's an opportunity to hear and to listen. So often when you're engaged in a dialogue, you don't have time to remove yourself somewhat and to hear what's going on around you, because it's just you and the other person, or one group and the other group. But in a trialogue, you can really learn not only what you're going to tell us and what we're going to say about oneself and about others, but you can learn it, I think, more effectively, because at any given point, you are an observer, and an active observer, I should say.
You can be a listener as well as a participant.
Right.
Yeah. And Sabak, why did you respond favorably? I suppose the same guy called you and asked you to be involved.
Yes, Don, he didn't mention it, but as a member of the ADC, the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee, he's concerned with issues in the Middle East. There were members of this organization who, I guess, asked him to contact me as a ready participant and in the Trialogue. Besides having in common the monotheistic tradition in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, we do share in common the Messianic tradition. And the Messianic concept in Judaism, in Christianity, and Islam is, I believe, a common link between us, or I should say among us.
So you have some rich heritage that is shared. Yeah. Because you do represent different faith traditions, but are willing to spend time together, talk with others, I think it'd be helpful for viewers to know just a little bit about you. Scott, you're relatively new to Austin. How long have you been in Austin now?
Almost 2 years.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you call home? Where did you come from?
Well, you know, home is where they have to take you in when you have no place else to go. My home is where my family lives. They live in Florida.
Uh-huh.
I grew up in Florida, lived in the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, South Africa.
Oh, my. So you're an international resident as well. When you talk about international and global village, you're quite proof of that.
Mm-hmm.
Sabak, in our conversations before this show, I learned that you're a Central Texan.
I was born and raised in San Antonio, Texas. I taught in Ohio and Missouri, and I'm now living with my family here in Austin. The profession that I have been for the last 25 years, teaching primarily mathematics at the college level.
Uh-huh. So, this is home to you two.
That's right.
Well, now, Don, in your ministry, you've served as a missionary. Where were some of those mission fields? Was that what sparked your interest in interfaith affairs?
Well, I think because my early childhood was in Turkey, I always had a fascination with the Middle East, and then did my doctoral studies in Islamics because I wanted to understand more of the interfaith relationship between Christianity and Islam, and then did Islamic and Christian dialogue in West Africa for a number of years. And so that's always been my interest, is trying to bring people together.
Well, that's a point that I wanted to reach. In the Trialogue, which is how old now, Don? When did you have
about
your first...
16 months, since February of '88.
And as you have set out to do this, what is the purpose? What are you trying to accomplish?
Well, I think the purpose could be said to be building relationships and promoting understanding. I think those two things. We want to build personal relationships and bridges across our barriers that may exist, and also kind of tear down the misinformation, the misconceptions, and the prejudices that we have, and try to understand, you know, just a little bit about each other's faiths.
Well, Scott, would that be some of the reasons that that some of the things that you want to accomplish? You've probably got members of the congregation to attend also. Are you trying to get more people involved?
Well, there is an effort to get more people involved. I think the difference in this particular organization or group that's quite informal at the moment is that anyone can participate. It's not restricted to clergy, and that's part of the perhaps liveliness of it. You know, sometimes when the clergy get together, we talk in the abstract and the theoretical and the theological, instead of bringing it down to the real world, to use the cliche. And that's one of the advantages of the group. The group will evolve as people come into it, become involved with it. I didn't really specifically, personally, have any ideas about what accomplishments or what purposes I might obtain from the group. I really, as I said before, responded to the invitation and was prepared to take from it what I could and to give to it what I could, perhaps more on the taking than on the giving, because it was another way for me, a relatively newcomer to the community, to understand more about the people who live here in Austin, particularly the people in the religious communities who live in Austin.
And Sabak, have you invited others to join you?
From the Islamic Center, we have a ready group of brothers.
They always come in great force.
Probably, well, I have to limit the number that come, because it seems like we have been a larger group than the room can accommodate.
What does that indicate? Their interest in learning, their wanting to be sharing with others about their faith, but also learning about others?
Well, Barbara, unlike Judaism or Christianity, there is no real clergy in Islam. That is, it is incumbent upon every Muslim to learn the basis of the faith, and actually to express that to others. As one of the sayings of Prophet Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of Almighty God be upon him, he said, "Ballighu anni walau ayah," that is, to convey my message, even if it is one verse. Now, of course, the basis of Islamic beliefs comes from the Holy Quran, in which we as Muslims are ordered to believe in all of the prophets, from Prophet Adam to the last prophet, Prophet Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of Almighty God be upon all of them, and to believe in the revealed scriptures, that is the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the final revelation to humanity, the Holy Quran.
So you all come and not only talk about your own faith, but talk about others also. When I say when you come to the meetings, is there a regular meeting place? Don, as kind of the convener, how does this happen?
No, we have not had a regular meeting place or time. We met in homes at the beginning, then we met in at Schultz's for a few times, and we met at the synagogue.
Must be an informal group.
Student centers and the Hillel Foundation, just different places. It just depends on the situation and what's convenient.
Well, it seems to me that although there are things that the faiths share, traditions and practices vary a good bit, and we're not isolated. There are larger circumstances, and it seems to me that you would have to have some sort of understanding when you come together for your discussions. Don, when you were thinking about getting this started, have you any guidelines, or what I would say is ground rules, so the group focuses when you come together?
I think when we first started, we didn't really know exactly where we were going, and we just kind of left it sort of open-ended so that everyone could just say what they were thinking and kind of relate to each other. But then as it went on, we did begin to try to have at least a starting point that we could deal with, and we've had several programs that have been more or less guided in the discussion. Sometimes a presentation, like in one case on what is God's purpose for humanity, and how do we live out that purpose. That was one particular one. Then more recently, the last one, or last two, have been just giving some discussion questions and then dividing up into smaller groups. And they're discussing one's personal faith. How do we live out our faith? How do we pray? And how do we read our scriptures? And how do we, what are our ethical standards that we face and things like that? Although we have not finished all those topics by any means.
So people respond from a personal point of view, but it does seem to me there would need to be a degree of sensitivity, simply because we all have our own language, whether it's about our geographic region or our profession. And when you said clergy, that's not something that functions the way that your tradition is carried out. I just got to thinking about the different ways of worship. I have kind of a preconceived notion when I say worship. And for instance, Scott, in the Jewish tradition, the corporate worship is when and where?
The corporate worship can be at any time.
But is there a traditional time?
In a community of 10. Generally, yes, in the morning and in the evening, sometimes morning, afternoon, and evening, on the festivals, on the Sabbaths. But there need not be any place. The place is where the people bring God
that is
sort of into their midst by forming a community, and in our tradition, the community is 10.
But
10 adults.
you do have a synagogue. There are two
Oh, yes.
synagogues here in Austin.
Well, there are more than 2.
Oh, are there?
Yes.
See, that's part of my education process. What are they?
In this community,
Mhm,
there's a Reform congregation. There are 2 conservative congregations. There's an Orthodox minyan, which would be a grouping, a community. They meet in a home.
Mhm.
There's the Hillel Foundation, which serves the student population of across the board, primarily Reform and Conservative Jews. There's the Chabad House, which caters mainly to the Lubavitch or Orthodox groupings in the community. So, and there's also a humanistic group in the community that meets informally.
Well, it sounds as if the opportunities for worship
And then,
are...
as you know, of course, the majority of people just don't meet, whether they be Christian Jews or Muslims.
A lot don't, yes. But there's a diversity in your worship, but still there are elements in congregation to congregation that are the same, whereas in the Christian tradition, Sunday is the traditional day for the major gathering, and in your tradition,
Friday is the congregational day of prayer. Prophet Adam was created on a Friday. He died on a Friday, and the day of judgment will occur on a Friday. So we refer to the day in which we congregate as Yom al-Jum'ah. That is the day of the gathering, of course, which is a preparation for the ultimate gathering. And in our Trialogue, maybe I could ask that question now. I don't know how it came into the Jewish tradition that it was changed to a Saturday, because from what we understand as Muslims, that the day that the Jews were ordered to actually congregate was a Friday. And then, of course, Christians changed that to a Sunday. I don't think that topic has ever come up for discussion.
put that on the list for your
put
next
that on the list for the,
Trialogue.
yes.
Is there a regular gathering place?
Yes, we gather at 1906 New Oasis. It's a couple of blocks
center.
From the University of Texas, the Islamic Center. Since most of the Muslims who are in their professions work at IBM or AMD or various places throughout the city that are not close to the Islamic Center, it's the students who actually are the foundation of the Islamic Center.
So when you say worship, an automatic image and activity comes to your mind, whereas it's a little different. And that just seems to me that sometimes you'd need to be a little sensitive. You'd also need to be sensitive, I'm sure, to stereotypes. We all have stereotypes. And I think from what I heard on the Trialogue that I sat in on, there needs to be a very much of a willingness to be open and to listen. The hearing of another's beliefs may be the first time you're hearing that, and would be something you'd have to work on. Like Scott said, it would be nice to be able to sit back and assimilate some of that instead of participating all of the time.
Yes, as you may have noticed in that last one, I was listening more to the 2 of them interact, or that is the 2 groups interact, because they had stumbled on something that was very fascinating, commonality that we as Christians don't share, and I thought that was a good point where I was listening. I think one of the important things that we've always tried to realize is that we can never understand another's faith totally, because it's only through the eyes of faith that you really understand the faith. So I think we try to avoid criticizing or jumping to conclusions about another's faith, and just speak from our own perspective as much as possible.
I think that needs to be emphasized. Though you cannot participate in a religious dialogue with another person without somehow representing the tradition from which you come, nobody in the group, at least I speak for myself, nobody in the group is there representing a group or a body or a church or an organization, or even formally speaking the tradition from which they come, but they are representing their best understanding, their personal relationship to that tradition, and just themselves. So that's why it's open, and nobody's speaking for other people.
And you would have to, all you could speak from is your personal experience, so people would have to accept that as a given. that you could not speak representatively in a final sense in any way.
I think that may be less true for the Islamic community. I think there's more homogeneity there perhaps than there is in the other two, which is one thing I think that we follow with interest.
Well, I wanted to ask you all to respond to something that I read in some material about interreligious dialogues that said conversations and these discussions usually have 3 stages. And in the first stage, it's a matter of unlearning inaccurate information and beginning to know each other. Now, it seems to me that the Austin Trialogue, that's the stage that you're in right now. Would you agree, Sabak, that you're learning more about and getting to know them personally as well as what they represent?
Well, surprisingly as it may sound, Muslims know quite a bit about the Judeo-Christian tradition. The verse in the Bible, through the seed of Abraham, the peoples of the world would be blessed, is known and understood by them that Prophet Isaac, one of the sons of Prophet Abraham, was the father or great-grandfather of all of the prophets that came from well, actually, let me lead into this chart. Now, I think it would be a lot easier, and I don't know if you can focus on this, and I'm just going to hold this up. But Prophet Isaac's son was Jacob, and Jacob had 12 sons. Of course, Jacob's name was changed to Israel, and from him the 12 tribes of Israel came, and that's in Genesis 35. So Muslims know this branch from which Joseph and Moses and David and Solomon and Jesus as the people of the book.
So perhaps your group is coming with more basic information about the other faiths.
I would say so. Of course, this is a written tradition, the people of the book, that is the Old and New Testament, and this is a verbal tradition, of course, that is codified in the Quran.
In the first stage, it talked about, really getting to know each other, and it said that in interreligious dialogue, you move to the next stage, which was becoming aware of values in the other's tradition, which you might find attractive to your own. And one of the examples that it gave was in Buddhist-Christian dialogue, the meditative, contemplative part of a Buddhist religion and lifestyle might be attractive and assimilated by the Christians, whereas perhaps the Buddhists became aware of the prophetic and social action in the Christian faith. Do you think, like studying the scriptures or learning more, have you reached the point where you're beginning to see, or perhaps not you all, because you all are pretty well versed in this, and I'm thinking of the other participants, lay people, that are they beginning to learn and appreciate the values of the other traditions? Would you say that perhaps there have been Christian participants that are becoming...
Oh, I think so, definitely. If a lot of people, a lot of Christians have participated, it's, I guess it's because of schedules that often prevent more regularity in attendance, but I think you can't go away from a session like this without having been impacted in some way. There have been negative moments, certainly. I mean, it's not all been roses. I mean, we've had our tense moments. And I think that even through those moments, though, we learn a lot about each other and about each other's faiths.
Well, the third stage, it says, is that together you have arrived at a place where there's reality and truth that you didn't know existed before separately, but it was only through that prodding and pushing and nudging that that came about. And I'm sure that's where you hope you'll be moving to. Let me jump to another subject for a minute. In this community in Austin since 1985, the former Conference of Churches sponsored a community-wide worship service at Thanksgiving. In the first 3 years, it was Jewish-Christian. Last year, the Muslims were brought into the planning, and I wondered if you saw opportunities for interfaith worship as an outgrowth of the dialogues. Scott, is that even thought about, or it's not intentional? You said there were not any specific hard and fast goals. But do you think worshiping together might evolve?
I haven't contemplated that, so I can't respond to that.
I think the Thanksgiving Square in Dallas has attempted things like that, where there is a joint worshiping where scriptures from all three traditions are taken and put together, and there's sort of a prayer which concludes all the traditions. So I think it's being done. We have not yet done it here, although we did do a little bit at Thanksgiving.
Well,
we included passages from the Quran as well as...
Yeah, this was the poster from last year's Thanksgiving service, and I think it communicates very well the interfaith nature by the graphics, and that's something new in the community of Austin. I think that makes a fine statement about where the religious community is moving. And our time just evaporates when we get to talking like this, but because you all are giving leadership to this, I've wondered if you've thought, so what do you see on down the line, maybe 5 years from now, the dialogue continuing?
Yes, I think so. And I think as the two traditions, the written tradition of the people of the book, the Christians and Jews, merges with the oral tradition within Islam, that there will be really this corrective factors applied in the monotheistic Abrahamic faith, and reestablishing that actually in the lives of the society here in America and also the world, because this is a worldwide phenomena. This is not just a local phenomena.
Well, we certainly hope that it will continue, and as we conclude, we extend deep appreciation to each of our guests for their willingness to lead the religious community in this new interfaith expression. You've heard about some of the challenging opportunities for listening and learning within the wider religious spectrum here in Austin. Thank you for watching today, and you're invited to join us next week at the same time. Good day.